Arcade exclusives.
Hello and welcome to another episode in the Arcade Exclusives series. This episode is a double whammy in more ways than one, as this time we're covering two developers, Atari and Midway, and I'm also joined by a very special guest, Dom from It's All Fun and Games. I'm a big fan of his, so if you aren't aware of Dom's channel, head on down to the link in the video's description and check him out. Firstly, we'll look at Atari, which really needs no introduction. One of the most influential early arcade game developers, they were releasing arcade games as early as 1972 with Pong. In the late 70s and early 80s, they solidified their name as a force to be reckoned with by releasing iconic arcade greats such as Asteroids, Centipede, Missile Command and Tempest. Of course, you'll recognise most of these as they were all ported to just about every platform available, but join us as we take a look at some of their games that never left the arcades. We'll start off way back in 1982 with a vector arcade game, Black Widow. In this game you control a red and black spider defending her web, which acts as the play area. You can move in any direction around the web and must shoot wave after wave of attacking bugs. This is a twin stick shooter like Smash TV, which were a popular thing at arcades in the early 80s, the most famous probably being Robotron 2084. If you're not familiar with them, then you have two joysticks, one in each hand, with one controlling the movement and the other shooting. It sounds fiddly, but once you get to grips with them, it's a wonderfully intuitive control scheme. The attacking bugs come in waves and in various forms, many of which leave behind these dollar signs called grub stakes in the game, which award points. The quicker they're collected by the player, the more points earned. There are 8 enemy types in Black Widow. Mosquitoes, a standard enemy which leave behind grub stakes when killed. Beetles, which will eat grub stakes, but also, like the mosquitoes, leave them behind when killed. Hornets lay eggs on the grub stakes, which the player has to push off of the web before they hatch into more bugs, and before the grub stake can be collected. Pushing these eggs off also awards points. Grenade bugs live up to their name by exploding when killed, which will damage any bugs and eggs within the blast radius, but also the player's spider. Rocket bugs cannot be killed and use other bugs to shoot miniature clones of themselves at the spider. Thunderbugs appear as a swarm every 4th wave. Shooting one will make it fly directly at you, and shooting it a second time will kill it. Killing the whole swarm awards a 5,000 point bonus, similar to eliminating a swarm of planes in Time Pilot, I suppose, if that means anything to you. The Bug Slayer isn't harmful to the spider, but is equally as hungry, so competes with the spider for all that tasty grub steak. This means that the Bug Slayer can help out the spider as it can kill all bug types, but that means fewer points on offer for the player. There are also bugs called spoilers which can't be killed conventionally. To eliminate these, you'll need a grenade bug or rocket bug to take them out, so this creates a strategic element as you try to coax them into the path or vicinity of an explosive, although again, the Bug Slayer can also take out the spoilers. So that's pretty much it. You're blasting bugs galore, and if you get hit you lose a life, with an extra life awarded every 20,000 points. As is the norm with early 80s arcade games, learning how to best maximise your score is the key to doing well in Black Widow. Although this never had a dedicated release, it did appear on several Atari compilations between 2001 and 2005.
Hey everybody, it's Dom from It's All Fun and Games. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Pete. I am so stoked to be talking Atari and Midway arcade games with you. When you think about 1980s Atari arcade games, most people are thinking Pac-Man, Centipede, Paperboy, iconic games that transcended the era. But visually speaking, they weren't pushing the envelope. Enter IRobot. And no, I'm not talking about the crappy Will Smith movie. This is a 1984 Atari arcade game that looks very different when you first lay eyes on the cabinet, and even more so when you stand in front of it, as the graphics are 3D polygons. Which not only looked very impressive for the time period, it was actually the first time there was a game with filled 3D polygon graphics and flat shading. You take control of the unhappy interface robot number 1984 as it attempts to destroy the ever-watchful eye of the Big Brother on each level. To do so, you must move to red-colored squares with the joystick and turn them blue. This will fire a laser that hits the eye, and once all the squares on that level turn blue, you capture the gem in front of Big Brother and blow him to smithereens. Way easier said than done, as you'll have to dodge and shoot other enemies and must time your jumps accordingly, because if Big Brother is watching you and you happen to be in the air, that will result in an instant death. After each level, there's a change in the gameplay, and it turns into a rail shooter where you fly through space blasting away at meteors and other obstacles, which I found to be a nice change of pace, and honestly more fun than the actual game. What's incredibly unique here is that the camera angle can be adjusted, another first for the time, and depending on how close you put the camera to our little robot friend, this will increase the amount of points you receive, because zooming in will make the game much more difficult since less of the playfield is visible. It's a challenging game with 26 different levels that repeat until you die. I can't say that I made it that far because this game is a real ballbuster. And after dying time and time again, the game actually took pity on me and offered me the chance to play what's referred to as an ungame within the cabinet, called Doodle City. But Doodle City is a simple drawing tool which you can use assets from the game to paint a picture. This is a really strange addition, because what are you supposed to do when you're done with your painting? Take a picture of it? Seems like a waste of a quarter. Originally, IRobot wasn't very well received, and there weren't even that many units of the game actually created, with estimates ranging around 750 to 1,000 cabinets. I don't ever recall seeing this at one of my local arcades, but after playing it, while I think there are some faults, like the unforgiving timer, it's really fun to play. With some tweaks here and there, this could have been a great port to something like the SNES, especially since that console was home to Star Fox, a game in a similar visual style. IRobot was way ahead of its time, and it would have been great if more people had the chance to try it out.
We're racing forward to the late 90s now with Road Burners, released in 1999. A motorbike racing game, Road Burners ran on the Atari Vegas arcade hardware and was housed in a cab with a sit-down motorbike attachment which leaned left and right to control the on-screen bikes. These could be linked up to 7 other cabinets for 2 to 8 player racing. It has a few selectable tracks from all over the world, including London, Paris and Washington DC, and there's a choice of motorbike and rider too, with some really wacky characters to choose from, including an alien and a skeleton. Being released at arcades in 1999, the graphics are similar to those you might find in a Dreamcast racer, but the sense of speed and frame rate are superior. You're racing against other bikers, but the aim is to reach the checkpoints within the given time. You can also perform tricks, although I'm not sure if these give you bonus points or a speed boost or anything. A fun looking late 90s racer here, which could have easily had a successful console port on the Dreamcast or PS2. Space Lords is a 1992 first-person space shooter. Billed as the ultimate dogfight in space, you pilot a spaceship that can rotate in any direction, roaming through an asteroid and nebula-filled area of space, trying to blast your enemies with the ship's laser cannons. Being a dogfight, Space Lords is of course a multiplayer game, housed in this rather interesting looking cabinet. This had 2 screens, each with its own set of flight controls, one on the left for the pilot consisting of a joystick and a handle for throttle, and one on the right for the co-pilot who could act as the ship's gunner. Again, these cabinets could be linked up, making a total of 4 screens and therefore a potential 8 players. As well as having laser cannons, your ship also has a few tricks up its sleeve. An additional tacking feature is the onboard nukes, which are limited in number. The ship can also cloak itself and perform hyperspace jumps. The jumps work much like in Asteroids, moving the ship instantaneously to another spot in the area. The benefits of this also mirror Asteroids, as you can use the jumps to avoid incoming enemy fire, particularly the nukes. Hyperspace jumps are also limited in number. Cloaking will deplete your ship's energy when used, as will taking damage of course, and this is indicated at the bottom of the screen. Pressing both the hyperspace and cloaking buttons together will cloak your ship and give you a double speed boost. This doesn't affect your number of available hyperspace jumps, but saps a fair amount of energy. As well as an energy meter on the heads up display, you'll have a radar showing the locations of any nearby enemy ships. The play area for each dogfight are actually large spheres, which, as I mentioned earlier, are littered with asteroids to avoid, but also nebulae. These gaseous star factories can be used to the player's advantage by providing a hiding spot. Once inside a nebula, your ship will be undetectable to enemy radar, but this is a bit of a trade-off as they also render your own radar inoperable, so you might get attacked unexpectedly. There are several game modes, so you can battle against each other in teams, solo against the computer, or in co-op. Missions see you taking on progressively more advanced alien races, and eventually in greater numbers. The music can hardly be called music, it's more of a dirge, like someone's holding down one note on a piano. Pretty bleak, but there are some decent enough sound effects coming from the laser cannons, warning alarms and explosions. Points mean prizes, so you'll be awarded with a rank befitting your score, the highest of which dubs you Space Lord as per the title. Not a bad little game, but one that feels like it would be better suited to DOS than the arcades.
The streets can be a dangerous place, and that was never more true than in the 90s. But thanks to Atari, you could live out your power fantasy of cleaning up the slums with this 1992 arcade game, Guardians of the Hood. This was a standard beat-em-up affair. Well, as far as the gameplay goes. But what you come across when you patrol the streets is complete lunacy. To start, you pick one of 4 Guardians. And you'll notice that the graphics have that Mortal Kombat style of digitized sprites. Some people are turned off by this look, but I just love it. I always pick Chief, because it reminds me of when I'm in the city and I buy a hot dog, and the hot dog man will 100% of the time refer to me as Chief. I love that. Oh, and because I often wear suspenders with no shirt too. The game supports up to 3-player simultaneous play, and you and your crew move to the right and take out a wacky array of baddies to make the hood a better place. Each character has a distinct moveset, combos, and a magic attack? Sure, why not? You can also pick up weapons, but doing all of this can be a challenge in itself, because the controls are the true battle. I usually just stick to button mashing and hope something comes of it. At the end of each level, you take on a gang leader. Once you defeat them, they'll learn the error of their ways and join you on becoming a Guardian of the Hood. And once you beat that level, it's back to the gym for some training, where then you'll go one-on-one with a fellow Guardian to earn the right to continue on. I love how over the top this game is with the campiness. The villain who looks straight out of a 1950s mobster movie, rather than an actual gang member from the streets of the 90s. The ridiculous names of all the random thugs or gangs, like the Shavers. Or how about the fact that baddies will pick up hobos and throw them at you? It's completely ridiculous, but awesome. The animation is very, very, very choppy. But then again, it adds to the charm, because despite how awful it looks, it doesn't play too bad. Who am I kidding? It's pretty damn clunky. But you want to overcome the controls and gameplay just to see how insane the next level is going to be. I mean, come on, what other games do you know that have a pervert trenchcoat flasher in them? Though as a New Yorker, I can tell you that to most this may seem crazy, but none of this madness is out of the realm of possibility for a big city. There are only 4 levels total: the city streets, the subway, Chinatown, and the funhouse. And despite how rough the gameplay is, you'll definitely make it to the end on a few quarters. The big boss is the Mobster Man, and he's a total pushover. Though there aren't many levels to work with, each gives off the aura of a dirty city. It's chock full of trash, graffiti, the occasional hooker, and what looks to be a dingy porn theater. The music is quite possibly the worst part of this crazy package. It's extremely harsh sounding, almost as if the sound is running through a broken Sega Genesis. The novelty alone is the main draw to the game, since the actual gameplay isn't quite up to snuff. But it is most certainly worth a shot, as long as you have a few friends along for the ride to join in on the laughs.
For our final Atari game, we're heading to the late 90s with 1999's War Final Assault, developed for the Atari Vegas hardware. A first or third person shooter for up to 4 players, War Final Assault instantly looks more like a console or a PC shooter than an arcade game. A port for the N64 was in the works but was eventually scrapped, making this an arcade exclusive. If played solo, the game's campaign mode sees you blasting your way through 8 enemy filled levels, each ending in a boss battle. If you're playing multiplayer, you and your friends can either play through the campaign cooperatively or engage in a free-for-all deathmatch mode, which has 4 arenas to choose from. The controls are a bit weird for an arcade game. You each have a joystick similar to that you'd find partnered with a 16-bit computer or 90s PC, which you hold in your right hand. The joystick has 2 buttons, again similar to 90s computer joysticks, one which fires your weapon and one that drops the current weapon, so be sure not to mix the 2 up. On the left you have several buttons, 4 for movement, so forwards and backwards and strafe left and right, 1 to jump, and 1 to change between first and third person viewpoints. So this control scheme takes a bit of getting used to as you're controlling the movement with the 4 buttons on the left. There are 4 selectable characters, although several players can pick the same one, but you can unlock some hidden characters later on by ranking up, which is achieved by defeating enemies or rival players. These 4 characters each have their own strengths and weaknesses, but their attributes aren't displayed on the character select screen, so you need to experiment to ascertain which one suits you the best. Each has their own unique starting weapon too, so that will most likely be a factor in deciding. There's a decent selection of weapons on offer, including laser cannons, flamethrowers, miniguns and missile and grenade launchers. The music's pretty good and there are some great sound effects, including a few that are reminiscent of the Doom series. It can sound pretty hectic when there's a mixture of laser cannon fire and explosions filling a room, with the screams of defeated enemies thrown in. The advertising for War Final Assault boasted that it would revolutionise arcade gaming. I'm not sure about that, but it's without a doubt a very unique concept for an arcade game and one that's subsequently received a bit of a cult following. Now we're moving on to our second developer, Midway. Another strong presence in 80s arcades, they initially made a name for themselves in the late 70s and early 80s by securing licensing rights for several popular games including Space Invaders and Pac-Man, but soon began to develop their own arcade hits like Rampage. In 1982, Bally, the popular pinball manufacturer, merged its pinball arm with Midway to form Bally Midway, which was subsequently bought by Williams in 1988. Midway really made their mark in the 90s, developing smashes like NBA Jam and by far their most popular franchise, Mortal Kombat. But of course, they had many games that were unique to the arcades, so let's have a little look at a few of those.
Midway, one of my favorite arcade developers. So what are we going to take a look at, Pete? Mortal Kombat? Oh, how about Mortal Kombat 2? Wait, it's gotta be Mortal Kombat 3.
Actually, Dom, Midway's catalogue has a lot more than just Mortal Kombat, and that wasn't an arcade exclusive. We're going to take a look at Strike Force.
Yeah, I knew that. I can't say that I remember Strike Force, but you know what, let me give it a go. Strike Force is a 1991 arcade game by Midway that was a kind of reimagining of the game Defender. The cabinet itself is rather unassuming, but it holds a real treat. When you pop in the first coin, you get the rundown of the storyline. The evil Saurian forces have laid waste upon 22 different planets that your people have been colonizing. It is now up to the Strike Force to fly in and eradicate the vile mutants. This game is a horizontal shooter, though the screen doesn't automatically scroll. As you move your ship with the joystick, the screen will move with you. The mission for each planet is to save any colonists that you can and eliminate the mutant threat. You're equipped with a plethora of weapons like spread guns, drop missiles, and shields, and you can also deploy foot soldiers who will go off on their own into combat. The kicker here is that your weapons pool is limited. So while your goal is to save the colonists, it's also to pick up and stockpile plenty of weaponry for your final battle with the Megastar. Though I love them, I have never been the best at space shooters, but Strikeforce is fairly forgiving. For the amount of commotion on the screen, I could stay alive for quite a while. What's cool about this one is that you can play the levels in any order that you want. Just fly your ship to the planet you want to save, and the mothership will drop you right in. There's no benefit in the order that you choose, but it's a nice option to have, just in case you game over and want to start from somewhere different. The whole presentation is really top notch here, as the graphics are bright and the backgrounds are detailed with plenty of scrolling. Destroying enemies and ships is satisfying enough as it is, but the multitude of explosions on screen make the game feel like a chaotic free-for-all. Each planet gives off a different vibe and holds a variety of mutant scum to destroy. Along with the look, the soundtrack is straight killer. Fast-paced, pulsing bass gets you amped up to blow up your foes. Yet another game that didn't receive a very wide release and no port to speak of. But this is an essential play for fans of games like Smash TV, especially since you can bring a friend along for the ride. Adding in that second player just amplifies the havoc on screen, but in the best way possible, since bringing a friend along for destruction always makes everything more fun. It's one of those games that you could spend an afternoon playing with a buddy, because both of you want to see the end screen, no matter how many quarters it takes.
Sarge is a pretty primitive multi-directional shooter from Bally Midway, released at arcades in 1985 and ran on their MCR3 arcade hardware. In this two-player military-based shooter, you take control of a tank and a helicopter with a button press switching between the two. Each player has two joysticks which have two fire buttons. When driving the tank, one is for ground-based grenades and the other fires up at helicopters. In the chopper, one's for shooting at enemy helicopters and the other drops bombs on tanks. When you successfully hit an enemy vehicle, a yellow cross appears on it, and you then shoot the vehicle again to destroy it. You can also score points by destroying the buildings and other environmental objects. There's not much to this, and it's got some very basic sound effects, but it's fun nonetheless. An Atari 7800 port of Sarge was planned, but ultimately cancelled, leaving this as an arcade exclusive.
Do you like mindless excessive violence? Because Midway sure does. And if you answered yes, then I think 2001's The Grid may be for you. The Grid takes on that old trope of killer arena game show, a la The Running Man or Super Smash TV. And of course it has that classic over-the-top game show host too.
It's time to play The Grid!
Man, with all the games and movies depicting the time of ruthless game shows, I'm surprised we haven't gotten one yet. You choose one of 8 characters. Yeah, there are some secret ones, but I'll get to that later. And then are thrown into an arena filled to the brim with weapons and obstacles, with the goal being to destroy the other contestants before they destroy you. There is a time limit for the level, and in the given time, the goal is to rack up a certain amount of points by killing opponents so you can proceed to the next, with the levels getting more elaborate and needing more points the further you make it. Keep climbing the towers and earning that sweet cash while you try and make it to the very top and stay alive. I don't think I've ever beaten this one despite how many coins I sunk into it, but I'll be damned if it's not a blast. There are plenty of weapons here like flamethrowers, cannons, rocket launchers, hell even some melee attacks too, where you can grab onto your opponent, toss them to the ground, steal their weapons. While you do have a health bar, some things can kill you in one hit. It's total mayhem, and especially fun when you're playing multiplayer. This cabinet could actually be connected to 5 others for a 6-player destruction derby. I can't say I ever saw a full 6-person game, and while playing solo is fun, playing with friends is the best way to experience The Grid. This arcade cabinet is one that immediately caught my eyes because of the unusual control scheme. The arcade has a joystick with a trigger on top, very similar to what you would find in a flight simulator type game. This controls the movement of your character, and obviously firing your weapon. But it also has a trackball which is used to aim. As weird as it may sound, it actually controls really well, and it's pretty comfortable to use. The graphics are nice and colorful, and it's hilarious watching some of the weapons literally explode your foes into bits with body parts raining down. For the time, it wasn't mind-blowing to look at, but the aesthetics certainly fit the vibe of the game. Same goes for the music. While serviceable, it wasn't particularly special. But who cares? When the only thing you'll be hearing is the obscenities your friends are yelling at you as you mercilessly turn them to dust. The cabinet also had a number pad, which you could use to input some codes that would allow you to unlock other characters. And what do we have here? Some familiar faces from the Mortal Kombat franchise. You could play as Scorpion, Sub-Zero, or even Noob Saibot. And believe it or not, this was the last time those characters made an appearance in an arcade game, since this in fact was the last arcade game that Midway ever made.
Power Drive was released by Bally Midway in 1987 and, as with Sarge, ran on the MCR3 hardware. This isn't your typical arcade racing game, unusually taking place from a side-on perspective. This is kind of a monster truck rally featuring numerous events and races. This was housed in a 3-player cab with each player having 2 large buttons. Yes, this was a button masher, similar to the old athletics games like Track and Field. Each player also has a lever used to change between 2 and 4-wheel drive. The player trucks are red, blue and yellow, with all the computer controlled trucks being black. There are a whopping 52 events on offer in total, each with its own name. The names will usually incorporate a US city. For example, there are events called the Wichita Wheelie, the Denver Crush and the Boston Bug. These include simple races, races over obstacles like cars and hay bales, towing objects and competing for the highest jump. You earn cash from events, obviously winning more the higher you place, and you use this money to enter into future events. You may notice some nods to other Bally Midway arcade games in the background. The tracks are laden with banners for other Bally Midway arcade and pinball games, including Tapper, Rampage, Tron, and one that we've already seen on the list, Sarge. Power Drive is an interesting game for sure, which feels more like Track and Field or 88 Games than a racing game.
When you entered an arcade in the late 90s, there was no shortage of light gun rail shooters. Time Crisis, The Lost World Jurassic Park, and House of the Dead being some I pumped hundreds of quarters into. But on Halloween of 1998, Midway released Karn Evil, a fantastic rail shooter chock full of horror, gore, and dark humor that would soon become one of my all-time favorites. The game opens on a spooky tour of a local graveyard. Our main character decides to hop off the trailer and investigate a specific grave with a jester on the headstone, that of Ludwig von Tokentaker. A mysterious coin lays in a slot on the grave which reads Karn Evil, Admit 1. It seems our main character knows something that we don't, and puts the coin in the jester's mouth. It immediately comes to life and whisks you away to the Karn Evil. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, as a kid, this part was actually pretty frightening to me. Unlike something like House of the Dead, where the voice acting was super campy, the jester is visually scary, but his voice work also sent shivers down my spine. You then get to choose from 3 different levels: the Haunted House, Rickety Town, and the Freak Show, with Rickety Town being my fave. The game is about what you'd expect from an on-rails first-person shooter. Move through the levels, pointing your plastic gun at enemies and blasting away. You get a plethora of weapons other than your standard gun, like shotguns, machine guns, or even an acid gun. It's great fun and the enemies you encounter are wild. Sure, there are the standard zombies, but there are also elves, robotic mechanics gone haywire, dinosaurs, and even mimes? As you shoot these baddies, they fall to pieces, which is absolutely grotesque. And at the end of each level, there's a boss battle with another insane creature, like what looks to be a zombie Maria Antoinette, Krampus, or even a giant zombie baby. It's all absurd. Once all 3 levels are beaten, it unlocks the final level, the Big Top, where you then make your way through to attempt to take on the vile token taker and rescue Betty. The overall presentation is so well put together. CarnEvil nails it when it comes to melding the graphics, settings, sounds, and balance between creepy and funny. And as you progress through the levels, there are so many neat things going on other than just the villains you'll encounter. Like when you fall off the roof in the haunted house and land in an open grave marked Rest in Pieces. Or busting into the kitchen and seeing zombies prepping humans for dinner. or when the zombies are hurling half-eaten corpses at you. There's plenty of mildly disturbing yet hilarious things going on. The game had so much disturbing imagery, there was even an option for the arcade operator to remove the gore, and even change the boss of the freak show level from the giant zombie baby into a teddy bear. After you defeat the token taker and rescue Betty, you find yourself waking up back in front of the gravestone entrance with token in hand. And you know what the sicko of a main character does? He puts the coin back into the jester's mouth to enter Karn Evil all over again, as Betty is screaming in the background. Some hero he turned out to be. I guess I can't blame him, because Karn Evil is a ghoulishly good time.
So that was 11 of Atari and Midway's arcade exclusives. Let me know if you've played any of these and what you think of them, and let me know if there are any of their arcade only games that you love that we didn't cover. Thanks again to our special guest Dom, and don't forget to check out the link to It's All Fun and Games in the description.
Pete, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show. It was a real pleasure talking arcade games with you.
See you soon for another episode in the series, and as always, thanks for watching.
I'll see you next time, and remember, it's all fun and games.